Well, President Trump has said that he wants to broker a solution between Moscow and Kyiv. But 2 weeks ago, before negotiations really even began, he said, one, Ukraine can't hope to recover all of its territory, and two, Ukraine can't hope to join NATO. The two big issues in this negotiation are going to be how much territory remains under Russian control and security guarantees, because Zelensky doesn't want to sign an agreement now and have this war break out again 3 years down the road. And
No.
so I don't see why, when you're going to broker a solution, you're leaning towards the Russian position at the very beginning. I think that's one of just a series of mistakes that the administration has made over the last 2 weeks.
Okay. Other way to look at that, though, right, is it's kind of just acknowledging reality, which is Ukraine is not going to kick Putin and Russia's army out of eastern Ukraine, period. Not going to happen militarily. And they're not going to join NATO. At some point, rather than say it's a mistake, don't we need to wait and see actually what the end deal is before we can sort of decide whether this is a mistake or not?
Well, I would argue that you and I can say that, but for the president, the secretary of defense to say that before negotiations even begin, they're already prejudicing the negotiation towards Moscow. And, that was just one of us in a series of concessions. So 2 weeks ago, President Trump broke with a Western agreed position for 3 years of boycotting Putin, said he'll meet with Putin. That Putin sees as a win, because that's giving Putin a break from his isolation. The first big engagement we have is not with the Ukrainians, but Secretary Rubio goes and meets with the Russian foreign minister. And then we had this bizarre episode in New York on Monday where the United Nations General Assembly voted on a resolution calling for a lasting and just peace. It was submitted by the Europeans. The United States voted with Russia, North Korea, and Iran against it because the United States disagreed that the resolution called the Russians out as the aggressors. And here's my worry: when you deal with the Kremlin and you make these concessions, Vladimir Putin says, I see weakness. He sits back and says, I'm going to just wait for further concessions. It's not the way to do it. And it's going to make it more difficult for President Trump to achieve his goal of brokering a settlement.
Well, I hear you. The flip side is that Putin is at least talking now. Zelensky is talking about willing to make a deal, something that neither side would talk about or was willing to do under Joe Biden. And the flip side, I think, of what you're saying would be a maximum pressure campaign against Russia. And Joe Biden had 3 years to sanction any bank that did business with Russia, to truly cut off Russia's ability to sell oil by sanctioning countries that bought oil from him. There were all sorts of things that Biden didn't do for fear of escalation. This is President Trump now explaining what security guarantees will happen. Take a listen.
It's a great thing. It's a great deal for Ukraine, too, because they get us over there, and we're going to be working over there. We'll be on the land. And, in that way, there's sort of automatic security, because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there.
Okay, so you think current status, millions of people have died, thousands more are dying weekly, monthly on a battlefield in a war of attrition, a meat grinder that's not going to change. Again, if Donald Trump can get a deal where some of Ukraine, not ideal, but some of Ukraine goes to Russia, there's meaningful security guarantees for Ukraine, and the United States gets something in return for our hundreds of billions of dollars of aid in terms of Ukrainian resources, and we have an end to this war, kind of a good thing, right?
That could be the deal, but let me point out, President Zelensky has shown some flexibility. Last year, he said, look, I am prepared to agree that Ukraine will not use military force to recover its territory. I'll use diplomatic, political means, but I want to have a security guarantee, ideally NATO. If you look at the Russian side, Vladimir Putin, he's basically talking about the same position that he's talking about at the start of this war, and it's hardened. And even today, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said, look, if the war ends, we're not going to settle for the current territory. We have to have the Ukrainians concede to us large portions of Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, which the Russian army doesn't even occupy. So in 2 weeks, we've been siding with the Russians, making concessions to the Russians. And if anything, the Russian position is getting harder.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.